evening. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. I'm very fortunate to have with me tonight on September 14th to be sitting with Representative Louis Blessing of the 29th District. Mr. Blessing, glad you could join us.
Glad to be here as well, Jason.
We're ending our summer break. You're getting back into session. We're back into the swing of things. Glad you can make it, of course. And the big thing is, the last time we were here, we talked about the possibilities of the budget being passed. It has been passed. We've talked with Representative Deaver about it last time. It's your time to get a chance to talk about the budget. We saw some different changes being made, especially in the realm that hits you most, and that's education. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a very large increase when it comes to funding for education. Your thoughts on what Representative Governor Kasich did to the budget and where you see the fiscal years going in the future?
Yeah, so, as you probably know, we had the veto in the budget.
Yes.
With the $84 million, if I have that correct, in public school funding vetoed. What that was meant to do was backfill the TPP reimbursement phase out, which, quite frankly, I like the idea of making them whole, but that phase out had been going on for a while, so we have to be fair here with that. But we backfilled the money. I absolutely support that. I know Southwest Local in my district, as well as Three Rivers, they got a lot of money from that. And we're thinking, hey, all's well, and then at the last moment just chopped away. So very, very upset about that. With regards to a veto override, I've heard that tossed around. Quite frankly, I doubt it will happen. Given the governor's running for president, I doubt anybody's going to want to embarrass him.
True.
And it really doesn't look good to, go after the guy in public and say, oh, we're gonna override this veto. Although I'm sure there's some teachers in the district who say, you go for it. But that having been said, there probably will be a corrections bill at some point this coming spring. Whether we take that up or not, I would certainly hope so. Remains to be seen. But in order to correct this, it will probably be done in a separate bill. There will be no veto overrides, nothing to embarrass anybody, and we'll just get it done quietly. But the rest of the budget was nice. I mean, we had $2 billion in tax cuts. We had a 6.3% income tax cut. There's tax relief for small businesses. Didn't really care for the increase on the cigarettes.
Sure.
So when I think it was 35 cents a pack.
Yeah.
Now I understand the health arguments behind this. That if you're going to tax something like that, it's going to make more people quit, which will reduce Medicaid caseloads because, as you've probably heard, a tax on cigarettes is a tax on the poor. And of course, if you're not smoking, you're much better off. But economically, we're a border county with Kentucky and Indiana, so a lot of the gas stations and shop owners on the borders have been screaming bloody murder at us on this one. But quite frankly, compared to what it was in the Senate at one point and what the discussions were, I think 35 cents is much, much better than what it could have been. Other than that, we had, what else did we have in there? I got to look through my list here because just to let you know, I'm actually coming back to earth here because when I got back from session, I went and got married.
I was going to say, a great congratulations is definitely indeed on that.
Thank you, but it's just been difficult trying to get back to it, but I did look at this. The one veto that I know caused some consternation in Columbus was the controlling board spending limits of $10 million. They didn't want to see a repeat of the Medicaid expansion decision with the controlling board.
Yes.
As you may or may not know, I signed on to the petition complaining about that back in 2013 when we did that. However, with this one, I mean, there was really no way that the governor wasn't going to veto something like that. And the controlling board, as much as people have complained about its questionable constitutionality, really the spending should be under the purview of the legislature. There's a lot of small ticket spending items that really would be handled better by a small committee like that. So it is defensible. Whether we want to do a veto override or not, again, I'm just not seeing it happening.
you've made mention of that word veto, and it's something that a lot of people kind of cringe at. And of course, especially as you brought up, the important key element to this is, of course, Governor Kasich making his bid for presidency.
Yes.
Do you think that any of his decisions at this point are really hinging on either him leaving or him staying with the state? How do you think his decisions are going when it comes to, one, obviously his veto decisions or anything coming that way, or anything in the future?
I think it's just business as usual
Okay.
with Kasich. I don't think he's doing anything posturing for this office or that. I think he's taking care of what he can take care of in the meantime. Hope that answers.
No, it does. Well, because the question always is that, well, everything else is just going to go to the wayside now that he has bigger aspirations to go towards, forgetting about the state. And, obviously he's going to be taken away for a bit of time. Where do you think that's going to cause any problems per se when it comes between now and next November? Or you're saying pretty much business as usual?
Yeah, I think it's going to be business as usual. I mean, he will be back in Ohio. As you know, Ohio is a big-time battleground state.
Absolutely.
I really suspect that it'll just be business as usual. Now, whether he can get in town in time to sign these things or not, that remains to be seen. But if he doesn't sign them, after so many days, it becomes law anyway. So I don't know if that'll happen. I'm trying to think of the last time we had a candidate from Ohio running like this for president.
Well, and that was my next question going to be, is was this something that anybody really foresaw? Because when I saw it myself, I was actually rather surprised because nothing was really leading up to this decision. Mm-hmm. It was all of a sudden, and from Ohio, Governor Kasich, and you're like, well, that's my state. And yes, we've seen plenty of people run from the great state, and of course, actually gain the presidency as well.
Sure.
So to see this, did you in the House foresee this, or did anybody else see this coming at all?
There had been rumblings about this. As you know, he ran in 2000, sure. And I think he was out pretty quickly at that point. But at the time, he was just a congressman, where I know that with presidential politics, there's a lot of weight given to governors because they've actually been at the executive level, albeit at the state level, but they've still been executives. Now with 5 or 6 years under his belt as governor, he's better poised. Say what you will about the guy, his polling does very, very well in Ohio against even folks like Clinton, Bush. I haven't seen a Trump matchup yet with
Sure.
with Kasich. So good for him with running that. But I still think with what he's going to be doing, I know that there's going to be a push probably again to lower the income tax at the expense of the sales tax. There's a body of literature out there that talks about how in all things considered equal, and again, this is one of the things that Kasich got, kind of in trouble with was the tax shifting. Mm-hmm. But again, if you consider all things equally, there's a lot of evidence out there that says, the sales tax is a much less bad tax than the income tax. And then, of course, you point to states like Florida, for example, where a lot of capital is fleeing from, say, New York, Connecticut, some of the more northeastern states that have higher income taxes. So really what he wants, his push is going to be to raise the sales tax at the expense of the income tax and then try to bring as much capital into Ohio in much the same way that Florida did. So whether he needs to be in Ohio every day to accomplish that, I don't know. He's got a very competent staff, so I suspect that push will be there. Whether the House and the Senate support it, that remains to be seen as well.
Well, again, we are still early in this fine process we call democracy, so we shall see as it progresses. Returning back to a little bit of the items that were in the bill for the budget, small businesses are finally getting a little bit more of a shine again. Do you think that was, again, something we've talked about in the past, that this is that shift again to trying to remove that red tape, to get people back in, to make Ohio that place to come?
Absolutely.
And this is that start.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, there are statistics that will show you that at least 90% of the hiring is done by small businesses. If you talk about jobs, which of course has been the mantra from the administration, the House, the Senate, every Republican throughout Ohio. If you're going to be, going for spurring jobs and spurring growth, you want to help small businesses more than anybody else. And really, it's pretty simple. I mean, just keep the taxes low and broad. The regulations is another big issue because you have small businesses that can't afford the army of attorneys and accountants and whatnot that the larger businesses can afford. So you want to keep the regulations simple but fair, and just go from there and let the economy move forward and let the businesses do what they do best. Let them hire. We'll be in much better shape.
And where do you think this puts big business at the cost of small business? Obviously we've seen some places go, but of course we still have our stable staying. GE, P&G, things like that. Sure. Where do you think that push and pull is going to come?
With what do you mean?
With as much focus as we're putting back on the small business, which is great, where do you think eventually a shift will come back to big business, or do you think we are fine with the way we are?
Well, I think we're fine with the way we are. I mean, you really should be treating all businesses equally. Now, some would say that the larger businesses would like more regulation simply because it allows them to knock out a lot of the smaller businesses and competitors. But still, what's good for small businesses in theory is good for all businesses. So I would suspect this push to help small business will continue.
Well, hopefully, again, we'll see these changes happen and things growing because, again, as we've talked in the past, making a viable place makes people come, and that's what we've been wanting to see for quite some time.
Absolutely.
One of the things that still kind of is interesting when it comes to the bill is one of the things that was made mention going back to education is the tuition fee freeze when it comes to our schools. Your thoughts on this? Because some people are very much a mixed bag when it comes to this.
That's a tough sell either way.
I see you feel the same way when it comes to a lot of people that I've asked. It's a very tough question to answer. It's because
the schools need the money.
The schools need the money, exactly. And if we freeze it, how are they going to ever get to what they need?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not something that's going to be a contender to talk about now. But do you think obviously we have 2 years on this budget here. Obviously, that's going to be something that's going to probably be revisited.
Oh, I'm sure it will. I mean, the schools are still very angry about the loss of the TPP reimbursement, a loss of funds. I know that in this past budget, the way the money worked is that the wealthier school districts are going to get hit harder at the expense of some of the poorer districts. But at some point, it's like the local government funding. At some point, it's you can only cut so much. So I can guarantee you we'll be looking at this in the spring.
Yeah, education has always been one of those factors that, and even Governor Kasich had made mention of education in his debates, and which has always, in some circles, has raised eyebrows already. So if we want to start bringing educated individuals, keeping educated individuals, we've got to start looking back at our schools, and I know that's something that you have
absolutely
stated day in and day out from the time you've sat at the table.
Right.
Where else can we go? I mean, obviously the budget has set us where we need to go. Where do you think we need to go to make those pushes forward?
Well, it's one of those things where I feel like you look at No Child Left Behind, Common Core, all these things. They focus on the testing and standards and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, I talk to teachers who are just exasperated by all of this, parents and students that are just up in arms. They're like, we can only do so much testing. This is just killing us. Quite frankly, I think the education problem is more of a poverty problem, if anything else. I mean, you look at a very fine school district like Mason versus Mount Healthy, and it's of course the teachers at Mason will get excellent marks because the students, their parents. Not to say that they don't care as much in Mount Healthy, but there's more involvement, there's more everything, and it's unfair for teachers in Mason to be compared to teachers in Mount Healthy based on some of these students' performance. So I would look at this way, hey, give the teachers a little bit of a break on this one. I know that a lot of their performance is graded on student performance, and it sounds like it would be counterintuitive to say, hey, scale that back a little bit. But again, you have poor districts where just showing an increase in anything is great. So I'd be giving them a break. Beyond that, I would be probably increasing funding, simply because if you have a more educated populace, if you focus on education, you're less likely to go to prison, you're less likely to get on Medicaid. People talk so much about, Medicaid and crowding out our budget. Well, if Medicaid drops substantially, there's that much more that you can use for education, and you'd actually probably get a lot less money going to incarceration as well.
Sure.
So really, basically at this point, I would simply hammer on the parents at this point, first and foremost, free up the teachers to do their jobs, and give a little bit more money back to make sure that they have the tools and resources that they needed to move forward.
Well, you had made mention of one of the items that is probably one of the biggest contenders, and that is testing.
Yes.
And you did, in House Bill 74, is requiring a reduction in state testing hours. You were saying that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you're saying, we're basing everything on curriculum testing.
Yes.
Lowering the amount of testing, where are you seeing that shift? I mean, obviously, if we were basing everything off testing, why lower it?
Well, yeah, it is a tough, it's like walking a tightrope here.
Sure.
If you have nothing, you're basically saying, okay, well, we're just every local jurisdiction, they get to college, and it's like, well, how do you know this student is prepared versus this one? Where if you do too much testing, you get kids, literally pulling their hair out. You really just need to get that fine line where the kids are getting the knowledge that they need, but then the metrics are such that the data is meaningful and you can apply it everywhere, so that all your comparisons, all your data crunching will make sense at that point. And I think we can reduce the amount of testing and accomplish that at the same time.
And by doing that, is that not helping teachers' workload by being able to create a curriculum on their own
Absolutely.
that's not completely based off of a test?
Absolutely.
Because if I'm not mistaken, by doing that, you're able to kind of spur a little bit more creativity, a little more free thinking,
Sure.
a little more outside of the box thinking, as opposed to, well, today we have to learn this, and this is what we have to learn here. And you're right. I have heard many statistics stating that children are far more concerned about passing or failing a specific test than they are passing or failing a grade.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, and you look at our parents' generation, and it seems like there was a lot less testing then. And you look at how more articulate they seem. It's like, what happened here? And testing certainly hasn't changed things for the better, in my opinion. So, again, it remains to be seen, but again, I'd like to reduce the amount of testing.
When you're looking at certain metrics like that, like you're saying, the amount of the testing that allows for certain data, to what point is there too much data coming in, that too much testing is going over and above? And I guess my follow-up to that would be is, where does Ohio fit when it comes to the amount of testing nationwide? Are we about the same, or are we over or below?
That's a good question. I know the Common Core was supposed to be nationwide,
Correct.
so I would expect that we were, about where everybody else is. But again, it's a lot more than we need, and I still haven't seen any evidence that's helping anything.
Well, I do know that this bill, you're hoping to gain better results. Have we gone to bat on this bill yet, or where are
House
we?
Bill 74,
Yes,
it's out of the House.
It is out of the House
Yes.
already. Okay, so we're just eagerly awaiting other decision.
Correct.
Your thoughts, if it's going to pass elsewhere, or do you think this is going to be something that's going to be still talked about?
No, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't pass.
Well, you never know how
That's true.
Things go. Not too long ago, we actually, speaking of schooling, that kind of helped this out. We had, at the first weekend in August, something that happened very new to Ohio, and that was the tax structure, free taxing, or no tax for certain items to help for school individuals, which kind of led to a couple things that we can talk about your ideas of the state tax structure.
Yeah.
This was the first time Ohio got to participate in this. Well, it was kind of fun, actually.
Yeah.
People were actually well, did you realize that you're getting that tax-free? And you're like, no, I didn't. Now, granted, it wasn't a luxury item, so you couldn't go buy a car on it.
Sure.
But it was out there to help people for schools. I know school supplies were heavily about it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you couldn't do a lot of things. But something like this as an incentive, why do you think Ohio was so late in the game on this?
Well, because there's a lot of people, and I think I'm one included, that isn't really, keen on tax breaks here and there and everywhere for things like this. Tax holiday, I was kind of on the fence with, simply because compliance, I can't remember the figure, it was something like 6 or 7% of GDP is literally compliance with the tax code. It's just, in my opinion, unnecessarily complex. Again, we should keep that tax code, or the taxes, low and broad, exemptions, breaks, all this other stuff, keep it to an absolute minimum. It sounds nice, but I'm just not so
You don't think
sure
that it's
about
going to be
that.
something that we will continue to see, or do you think this is...
We might. There were some big players behind that. Retail merchants, obviously, were big behind that.
Sure.
I think even the chamber was, simply because any tax break for them is great. But again, I'm just not super sure.
Well, I'm kind of going in with House Bill 9 is where I'm kind of leading in as well, and this was to improve the way that the tax expenditures were tracked and monitored.
Yes.
You were voted in favor for it, and your thoughts on when you saw this bill come to you, where were your thoughts on this? Because obviously, if you're changing a structure, obviously we're looking at some major changes.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, when a lot of these tax breaks and incentives are put into place, they stay there and people just tend to forget about them.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point do you say, okay, we have to look at this and reevaluate? Did this actually accomplish its goal? And if not, we need to have the spine to say we're getting rid of it. Because every time that we give a tax break or a tax incentive, the state is losing revenue it could have gone to education or wherever else.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very much in support of that. At least that was where my thoughts were at the time.
Well, again, like you said, you make a very interesting point that I haven't heard in a long time, that if the old mantra, if it's broke, we got to fix it somehow.
Sure.
I don't see that a lot in a lot of discussion where a lot of people are like, well, it's always been there. Okay, but hasn't that always been the problem where we're not getting out of certain things because it's always been there?
Yeah.
Obviously this is one faction. You can go in other directions, obviously, in talking about it. So it's interesting to hear you say that, and because I think you brought up a good point. That money can go elsewhere.
Absolutely.
We can make energy in different areas to go to different places.
Sure.
Again, we're looking at, it's passed the House unanimously, it's going to the Senate now. Your thoughts if this one's going to
Certainly
gain
hope it
traction?
passes, but again, you don't know. I don't know what horse trading they're doing between the House and the Senate. That's to be seen between the big three: the governor, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House.
Sure. Of course, we don't want to give out any lost opportunity to your committees in which you're on. Of course, how are things that way, and what's going on with the seats in which you're sitting?
Sure. So this summer we've had some meetings with the Energy Mandate Study Committee. As you probably know, we passed last General Assembly Senate Bill 310, which, among other things, froze the current energy mandate ramp. And what that does is it says, okay, until they change it, but up until 2027, we will slowly get to a point where 12.5% of our energy has to come from renewables. There has to be a 22% reduction in energy usage, which was the energy energy efficiency part of it, and there was, of course, some peak demand reduction in there as well. But we were meeting this summer off and on. Actually, we were meeting really all through this year with it, and again, really, it's going to sound overly simplistic, but at the end of the day, we came to the conclusion with the Fed's EPA Rule 111D and a lot of the controversy behind that we really just didn't know what was going to happen. because there were some court cases that basically said the federal EPA can dictate to us what our state policy should be. With that in mind, we can't entirely repeal the energy mandates, and it doesn't really make sense to ramp them up more or do whatever. So I'm thinking the committee is going to just say, look, we're going to freeze this indefinitely until we have greater clarity. Because again, I mean, if you can't, in my opinion, would be to get rid of a lot of these mandates, simply because I feel like if something truly is this good, let the market handle it.
Okay.
If solar panels produce more energy or more efficient or cleaner for the environment, so on and so forth, the market will take care of that. People will put them on their houses. It'll work. But in lieu of that, without knowing that, it's like, okay, well, we're just going to relax. We don't know what the feds are going to do, so the freeze will probably remain indefinitely.
When it comes to bringing energy efficiency, and I'm kind of looking at the larger scope of it, you're bringing up the solar panels, which is part of it, your hydroelectric, your things like that. Those are big ticket items that I think people are still a little leery on.
Sure.
And granted, I think a lot of people are still holding on to yesterday's technology, whereas, a solar panel was the size of your roof, and now you can get 20 by the size
Yes.
of your roof now. I know that you're kind of looking at letting people decide. Do you think we as consumers are still a little leery on the whole thing? Again, not to go back to what we said earlier about, well, if it's not broke, then let's not worry about it. But
I don't know if it's so much that they're leery, because I mean, if you look at the polling, a lot of people do support renewables. I mean, I can tell you several Republicans that absolutely support, hey, let's do, solar panels, this or that or whatever. In fact, but at the end of the day, with this, I think it comes down to an education issue. People really just don't know, how much energy they can be saving. As far as solar panels and that, it's still not the best way to, reduce the so-called carbon footprint. The best way to do that is through energy efficiency. In lieu of energy efficiency mandates and renewable mandates, I think the best policy would be to just say, look, we're going to educate people about how, if you have this old refrigerator, you should upgrade it. I could see even some incentives here and there for people to get on board with that, to slowly, move ourselves that way. But again, a lot of people just don't know that. They don't know, they should be doing this or that or whatever to reduce their energy bill, and there's some people that simply don't care. So,
and that becomes, I think, the stumbling block for you. You're saying education. That's great. And I think I think everybody should be educated.
Yeah.
But how do you, as someone in the house, come in and say, I'm coming to your house to tell you what's not necessarily what needs to be done, but what you could do?
That's correct. Never really want to tell anybody what they have to do, but if you make it so that if you found that if people were using the CFL light bulbs, if you made it so that through subsidies they were below regular light bulbs, and that using them would reduce energy so much that our rates would go down, and people could get them cheaper than regular light bulbs, they would buy them. So it's really just economically pushing people in a certain direction.
And of course, with us losing our old bulbs to getting the new bulbs, I mean, you're kind of forced into it in one regards. But there are many other things. I mean, you can go to the really large ticket items like the solar panels or a wind turbine or anything like that,
Sure.
as long as your neighborhood would allow for it. But again, that's a lot of education that's put up against you. Now, do you feel that it's all on you, or do you think the feds should be backing you up as well?
Well, I was going to say I think the feds probably are backing us up to a large extent, because they've been pushing this more than we have. In fact, they're the ones that really want to see mandates in place and so on and so forth. Otherwise, that 111D ruling wouldn't be there.
Of course, is it not maybe something that maybe we as a state need to go, well, if our state is doing it, then maybe we can follow suit as well? I mean, I'm only bringing it up because I ended up having to go through the wonderful wind farm in northern Indiana because they decided to work on 65, which is not something we see hear as much. I mean, you know, I'm traveling a number of miles, and that's all you see, turbine, 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 whereas
Sure.
you're like, well, in 71, we could have done the same thing too. And so I'm wondering, is that not a means of educating as well? But that's also something changing our state's mind as well.
Yeah. Could be. Could you explain that a
Sure.
little bit?
No. I mean, looking as an educational tool.
Yeah.
If we as a society go, well, if our state's not doing it, why should I?
Yes. Okay.
So
okay.
going in that kind of context, because I mean, we are shifting our structure when it comes to energy, renewables, things like that in our state. You know, we're looking at natural gas. I mean, you look at even up just a little bit north of us in Hamilton, the city of Hamilton, they have a whole natural gas station for people
Sure.
and things like that. You're looking at things, you've got fracking obviously going on in the lower portion of the state. So we are changing, but not as quickly as obviously
And
other
I think
states.
that's the crux of it right there, that, you know, some folks would want to, you know, through mandates push it so it goes faster than others. Quite frankly, you hit on a good point that I probably should have brought up. You know, Indiana's doing X and we're doing Y. That's really as it should be. You know, the Fed's doing, you know, mandates of their own. It doesn't make as much sense. You really want to have the idea of federalism going on, where the states are free to set their own policy, which we are to a degree, and then see what shakes out. You know, if one energy policy turns out to be far better than the other states will adopt it, and eventually you'll get to a place where, you know, you're optimal.
Right. I guess the big key word is being to look at the options.
Yes.
You know, obviously we don't want to be stuck in one and, well, that didn't work, and then you just fold your hands and call it a day. I think we're looking at, that's the idea, is looking at these options.
Right.
Making the best.
That's right.
Taking the best option and making the better solution out of it.
Right.
Obviously, you know, we have many different ideas for renewables and what's going on. Do you think that the state will go even further and do more?
Probably not.
Okay.
If anything, they would let the market work
Okay.
with something like that. And if quite frankly, if a lot of the renewable energy sources can't hack it in the market at large, that's just going to be how it is. They're not going to become, this isn't a perfect world, of course. So, you know, like if solar panels couldn't compete as well as like oil or natural gas, they're not going to be anywhere near the amount in the portfolio that oil and natural gas are. However, natural gas, due to very, well, I was going to say as of maybe a year ago, we're gaining. Oil, I think, now is becoming a much greater share simply because it's so cheap compared to what it was, you know, 6 months to a year ago.
Absolutely.
So with the Saudis, of course, you know, producing more and more, flooding the market and dropping prices.
I mean, especially when you're driving by and seeing $1.89, and I'm like, what year is it? Where am I? You know, it was a welcome sight, but again, you know.
I do recall, I think we went below $1 in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. A little small period of time.
Small period of time, I believe you're right.
Yeah,
But that's.
It's impressive.
It is impressive, it is. But looking ahead, obviously, because we're getting close to the bottom of time here, is looking ahead. We're both back from summer break.
Sure.
You're looking to finish out the year. What are you looking at for our district, or what are you looking for the state to go forward in the next couple months?
I can tell you that probably one big thing that's going to be taken up here in the fall is that, and I sent you an email about it, there was
Yes.
Senate Bill 63, which is the online voter registration, which has caused some controversy with really both sides of the aisle, but thinking that people would be able to skirt the system. But the way that Secretary of State Husted has this bill written, I think it is something that I can support. In a perfect world, everybody would agree you should be able to register online.
Sure.
I mean, it's simple, it's convenient, but you know, there's people that believe that with something like that in place, that there's going to be fraud, that there's going to be all these people just signing up and then being able to vote willy-nilly, and it's just not how it works. In fact, you have to have a lot of information in place for something like that. And then even then, they're going to, if you use your driver's license, for example, they will check that against the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to see if, you know, you are who you say you are. So It's pretty well tightened down, in my opinion. So
There's a lot of checks and balances that are going to go within
Correct.
this. It's not going to be something as simple as
no,
an eBay transaction. I mean, there's a lot to go into this.
that's right.
Obviously, you said convenience is one part of that. The idea is that everybody can do it now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that anybody can't just go to their local BMV and be able to take care of it there or anything like that, but the idea is, oh, wait, I've got to take care of that prior to the election, or so many days and everything else. Getting it done on when you're thinking about it, as opposed to, well, now I have to make an appointment. Not necessarily make an appointment, but you got to think about it, go do it. This is something you can go upstairs, do, be
Yes.
done. Obviously, we're looking at progression via technology. Do you ever think there's going to come a time when voting will come to that point where we do it at home on that Tuesday?
Could happen. I mean, I can never say never with that one, but
Sure.
Again, you would have to have enormous amounts of security in place for something
Your
like
checks and
that.
balances on that definitely change, especially when it comes to fraudulent voting.
That is absolutely correct.
Obviously, we were in places in which people were there, and we were experiencing a very unfortunate abuse.
Sure.
But here would be something that would be very difficult to police, as long as you had those proper checks and balances in place. How does one even think about going about that next step? I mean, obviously, you were looking at something that, as simple as registering.
Yes.
This is a much greater step.
Yes. And again, just to be clear, we're not looking at that.
Oh, no. You're correct. Make sure that is out there. This was something that I proposed as a hypothetical, and
Yes,
that's
yes.
just...
I really don't know. I would think that you would have to really batten down the hatch with security, as you've mentioned. I don't know what that would look like, to be perfectly honest with you. But it would, and again, in a perfect world, it would be something to strive towards. I mean, it would be extremely convenient, and I kind of dismiss the idea that this would back one party or another. As has been said, I don't buy that would be the case with online voting or online registration.
Sure. That's interesting that you said that people would actually look at it as...
Well, there's
better
both
in-
sides of the aisle have complained about that, So it's like, our side would say that, well, there's a lot of people that are just going to, start registering fake names, and then the Democrats have said, well, wait a minute, what about the poor people that can't access the internet? Again, I don't see... I don't see that being a major problem, the online registration.
And it's interesting that you bring up that type of argument. And I mean, I know you're not advocating or anything like that, but showing that people actually still think that, if you started something via the internet, then it blocks somebody. We still have another system
That's
that's
correct.
still available.
And that is a good point, and that is not going away. with that bill.
And that's what I was just going to say. Just because you're instituting a new means doesn't mean that that's being phased out, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're not...
Still show up at the Board of Elections, get it done there.
That's fair. I mean, again, you're looking for convenience, I understand that, but you're also saying you're not dismissing what has worked in the past.
That's correct.
I guess tonight's show could be surnamed, if it's broken, find a means to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not broken,
Let it go.
let it go. Well, Mr. Blessing, we have reached that
wow.
magical time. Yes, believe it or not, it's gone quickly. But for those of you who would like to get in contact with Mr. Blessing and get some more information, you can do so just as easily as I can, and we'll get that information up on the screen as soon as possible. And I know that we're working on that. That's our lower third there. But if you were trying to get a hold of him, you can always get a hold of him in 3 different ways. That is via there we go, the snail mail in his office at 77 South High Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215, or giving him a phone call at 614-466-9091, or the email at rep29@ohiohouse.gov. All 3 will get you information to and from, and I know that he will answer any questions for you, because that's what he's there for. Well, Mr. Blessing, I'm glad that we were able to sit down tonight and discuss what needed to be discussed. Look forward to seeing you after elections. Luckily, you don't have to worry about that
I
this
know.
year.
Very glad about that.
But But we'll reconvene before the end of the year, see how the year went for you and how things went, and see what 2016 brings to us here at the Round Table on the
Sounds
Columbus
good.
Report. So until then, thank you. And
Thank
of
you,
course, I
Jason.
want to thank you for joining us as well. If you found this as enjoyable as I have, sitting here discussing all that is affecting the 29th District and you at home, you can always rewatch us on demand or on the channel. Or if you'd like to even produce your own program, 825-2429, that's our number here, gets you here in the office, create your own program, do something for yourself, or be a part of our crew. We'd love to have you. Again, I'm Jason Grzegorek, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to give it your chance to talk about things that affect you here on the Columbus Report. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time.